Hey there, interwebs. Quick little note before we get into this video. For some reason, my mic actually came unplugged during the recording of this video, and I was recording several different videos today, and I talked for about like 15 minutes or so about this topic, and so I don't really have the energy to re-record this whole video, so I do just apologize up front that the audio on this particular video is going to be a little bit of lower quality. I tried to beef it up, and it should still be listenable and legible. It should be able to hear it, but it's not up to my normal standards, so I just want to let you know that I do apologize, and I do recognize that as the thing, but I still hope you enjoy the video overall and enjoy my thoughts. Hello, interwebs. Yes, today we're going to be talking about the recently released news that both Chris Chibnall, the the executive producer and main writer in charge of the last two seasons of Doctor Who, as well as Jodie Whittaker, who has been playing the recent iteration of the Doctor, are both going to be leaving the show very, very soon. There's going to be a very, very short, abbreviated series 13 of Doctor Who with only 6 episodes that we also got announced previously during the Comic-Con panel that they had, that this is going to tell one singular story. And then there are going to be 3 specials in 2022, all culminating in a feature-length special, the third one, that will have Jodie Whittaker be leaving the series. So ultimately, there's a lot of stuff to talk about with this, namely around Jodie Whittaker being the first woman Doctor, what that means for the next Doctor going forward, as well as some stuff that's happened within the series itself, as well as a lot of the discussion around Chris Chibnall as the lead writer of the show. So let's start, I think, first with Chris Chibnall. I think that's probably the best place to start with, this discussion. Chris Chibnall has been a writer on the show of Doctor Who that I honestly have not really loved. I have been a Doctor Who fan ever since, I started watching Doctor Who with the 9th Doctor's introduction. I've seen every episode of the entire run of modern Doctor Who and all the spin-offs, including Class. Yes, I've seen Class, and I've even seen Miracle Day of Torchwood. But I have not seen a lot of the classic Doctor Who stuff. But I am a big fan of modern Doctor Who, and I've really, really loved it for a very, very long time. And I have loved this era under Chris Chibnall as well. But I have felt like, watching Chris Chibnall's era, that there has been a distinct... I don't want to necessarily say downgrading quality, but it just feels like the show hasn't inspired my love as much as I really wanted it to. There's been a few episodes here and there and a few things in Chris Chibnall's run that I've really, really loved. I namely love a lot of the characters. I love the new companions, especially the actors, especially Graham being a particular highlight. I also really loved the new Master, who I thought was actually absolutely excellent. And I thought the writing for him was very, very wonderful, and the performance was absolutely on point, fantastic. But all that being said, I haven't really loved Chris Chibnall's writing. I feel like my main issue with Chris Chibnall is that he is a writer who very much is in his element when he is writing long-form stories. You look at stuff like Broadchurch, and even Torchwood to a degree. Those were series that were, because he wrote for Torchwood, those are series to a degree that were grounded in one place, and had a set cast of characters that you could evolve and tell numerous stories about over time, especially Broadchurch. It's very much about one place and just sort of dealing with the interconnected stories around a community and really doing that serialized aspect and really grounding it in place. Doctor Who is a show that does not really find itself conducive to that kind of storytelling. It's very episodic. It's very off doing a new adventure every single week. And while there have been overarching stories, especially in modern Doctor Who, a lot of it is just like very sparsely portrayed through each episode and sort of culminating in one big finale, rather than telling one long story arc throughout the entire series. And you really get that sense that that's something that Chris Chibnall has really, really struggled with. You get the sense that you see this in each individual episode with the episodic stories. He introduces a ton of side characters that all have these really interesting arcs, but because you are trying to tell all these different side character stories, plus also having 4 main characters, that's just greater than than anything in modern Doctor Who's time. He's just trying to do too much with too many characters, but you really get the sense that that's what Chris Chibnall likes to do, that he likes to tell a bunch of stories, a bunch of different characters. As you can clearly see that he has 4 companions, the most that Doctor Who has ever had. But as a result, it kind of gets everyone lost in the shuffle and doesn't really allow you to tell a good, focused, singular story or good stories with all of these characters, because they're always so truncated and abbreviated and have to be filled with so much space. So, that being said, and also just some story decisions in general I have not really loved with Chris Chibnall. Like The Timeless Child, I don't hate it as much as other people do, but I do think it kind of undercuts what makes the Doctor special. It kind of chosen one-ifies the Doctor, even more so than even Stephen Moffat did, who is someone who loves to chosen one-ify all of his characters and self-aggrandize all of his characters. But Chris Chibnall, I don't think does that necessarily in the writing, but with this story choice, I think did that very much. So, it's all stuff that I don't really, really love. That being all said, I'm glad to kind of see him be leaving the series. I don't have any ill will towards him, and I'm really frustrated even more that there's a toxic side of fandom that like just hates this guy and despises him. That happens in so many fandoms today. Even Star Trek and Star Wars have this as well. But it really got honed in on Chris Chibnall during his run, which I don't think is fair. I mean, again, I don't love the guy as much when it comes to Doctor Who, but I think it's toxic fans just love to point their hatred at someone and showcase their misogyny and all this other stuff that they have, and just other toxic viewpoints at one person because it makes it easier for them, rather than recognizing that writing is hard, writing is different things, that are people's different strengths and weaknesses. There's larger and more nuanced discussions we can have about writing. I don't love Chris Chibnall, but I have critiques of him, and there are just things that I'm like, yeah, I just don't like him as much. I'm not going to get angry about it and toxic about it and blame, wokeness or, the fact that there's a woman doctor and stuff like that. So it's hard for me to expressing my dislike of Chibnall has always been hard for me because I didn't want to get caught up in that toxicness. And so it's one of those things that, like, I'm glad to see him go, but I'm not glad to see the toxic fandom who will probably revel in him leaving. That being said, though, what I am excited for with this announcement is that these stories, this final 6-episode season, which is going to be much more truncated, will be telling one story, which I think will definitely play to his wheelhouse. So I think that's going to be very exciting. And then getting 3 specials, which can be longer in form, sort of continue off that story, sort of give a culmination, a capstone to this arc that he's been building over his series, I feel like will be really, really good. I think it'll give him a chance, the best possible setup to end on a really strong note, play to his strengths, and also finish out his run on his own ending, and really feel like ending on his own terms. And I really do appreciate that. I think that it'll sort of allow him to feel like he culminated everything he wanted to say with the show. And I think that's sort of the best option for me. Honestly, this is the best way for it to go. I wouldn't want him to have been fired, to have been kicked off. I would like to see him finish his arc, and I feel like the way that this is structured will play to those strengths. That being said, Jodie Whittaker, I think, has a slightly different place within this narrative and discussion as well for me, because I really like Jodie. I have not loved her Doctor. Again, that's more on the back of Chibnall's writing, who's never really set a clear characterization for her. But within that, Jodie did a great job. I think she just brought this wonderful mechanical nature to her. She just always seemed excited. She always seemed like she was ready to tinker with stuff. She very much felt like the tinkerer doctor to me. And she brought this energy and yet this reservedness, I feel like, to her. Like she was always holding something back. And I think she portrayed that really, really well. This excitement and yet kind of holding back a little bit. And not as emotionally open as even previous doctors have been. And doctors have never been super emotionally vulnerable. And I think for a female doctor to come in and portray someone who is much more closed off emotionally, I think is a really great turn for her, and really sort of breaks down those stereotypes and really shows that the doctor is the doctor regardless of whatever gender presentation they may have. And so Jodie, I thought, just did a wonderful job in all of that. And so I am honestly sad to see her go. But I do understand too, with a new showrunner coming in, you want to give a fresh start to that. So again, I would have liked to see her continue on. I would have liked to see her doctor get a little bit better characterization than she's been given so far. But that all being said, I think this is also a good natural stepping off point for her as well, despite my disappointments with that she wasn't given the best chance to succeed as she could have. But I think she did the best with what she was given. And hopefully things like Big Finish and novels and things like that will be able to flesh out her doctor, maybe even returning for other specials, stuff like that, in the future. And maybe this final few episodes that she get will really showcase all the stuff that I've been disappointed with the portrayal so far in terms of the writing aspect of it, because her acting portrayal has been phenomenal. So that's my sort of feelings on Jodie Whittaker and Chris Chibnall on that side of things. I think there's also another natural question that comes up a little bit, and I don't want to get into this too much, but a kind of a natural question that kind of gets raised of, well, who is next? Who comes after this? And I think there are several things that have to be considered when it comes to the Doctor, and sort of my thoughts on it. And I don't have anyone in particular in mind, but the thing that I think about with this, with thinking about who the next Doctor should be, and again, I don't want to get too farther into this, is the Doctor is such a celebrated icon within British culture. And it's such an important character in who gets to portray the Doctor. And having Jodie be the first, woman Doctor to step into this role, I was very excited to see that. And I'm saddened that she kind of got wrapped into all this toxicity on top of the Chris Chibnall stuff. Like, being a woman doctor was always a woman doctor was always going to carry with it that baggage. Toxic fans are going to toxic fan no matter what you do. Even if the writing had been spectacular, perfect, and the best Doctor Who ever made ever, it still would have occurred. And so I feel like given that and the culture that we're in now, I feel like to go back to another doctor who is, cis straight white dude. Who, don't get me wrong, I love them all. I love Peter Capaldi. I love David Tennant. I love Matt Smith. I love Christopher Eccleston. Blanked on his name for a second. Apologies to him. I love them all. They're great. But I really think that, the doctor should say something and we should do something more with it. And so I really think that, there should be another woman being the next doctor. I really think that would be a good statement as well. Evoke, no, this is who the doctor can and could be going forward. And I think that would show that commitment to that instead of going back to the safe quote unquote option. That I'm sure the BBC might be, there's maybe some elements of BBC pushing for that, and I definitely know the toxic culture is pushing for that as well. I think the other thing too is I think Jo Martin would be a great choice for the next Doctor. For those of you who don't know, Jo Martin was the woman who played the Doctor in one of the episodes of Chris Chibnall's era, a sort of big surprise moment in that series that she was a version of the Doctor. I think that, number one, it would be great to see a black Doctor. It would also be awesome to see a black woman Doctor as well. I think Jo Martin did a phenomenal job in the few moments that she's given. She really kicked butt, and I absolutely loved her. She even had more characterization as the Doctor than Jodie Whittaker's Doctor has had. Not to compare performances, they're both great. But in terms of writing, in terms of the characterization, I think she was given a lot more, just in the little bits and pieces that she was given. And I also think that it's really important that we don't have, the first black Doctor, the first female black Doctor especially, be sort of a side note. Be a one-off. Be just an episode or two. I really think that it would be important to show her being the next Doctor and really having her up front. And I think that would be amazing. I know that's a little bit of a sidestep, and I don't want to get too sidetracked by that conversation, but it's something that naturally comes up in this conversation as well. But I think overall, from just the announcements that we have right here, right now, about Chris Chibnall and Jodie Whittaker leaving, there's a little bit of bittersweetness, but I ultimately feel like this is probably the best thing for Doctor Who at the moment. I'm excited to see where it's going to go over these few episodes. I'm excited to see where Doctor Who goes after that. The only negative feeling I have is I wish I could see more Jodie, and I'm saddened that the toxic culture will take this as a win, even though, they would have taken it as a win even if they had quit 5 series from now. They've been like, yeah, she finally got fired, even though he was going to have to leave eventually. So it is what it is. It was always going to be a thing with the toxic culture, but it's just something that's just God, it's so headache-inducing and frustrating. But overall, I think this is sort of the best choice in the best situation given what it is. So that's my thoughts on Jodie Whittaker and Chris Chibnall leaving Doctor Who. I'd love to hear all your thoughts down below on what you think about it. I'd love to hear that in the comments. Don't forget I have a Patreon page you can support me at. I have my main channel, Jessie Gender. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel as well. But beyond all of that, I hope that you, as always, live long and stay sexy.